Hey, it's Francis Lamb, host of The Splendid Table. Every week on our show, we talk about food and cooking and the meanings of food and cooking. We talk with the most interesting people in food about their techniques, their culture, and everything in between. Whether it's about how fried chicken took over the world or how Instagram changes the way people are actually eating. It's a food show where everyone is welcome. Come join us. You can listen to The Splendid Table wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
So you don't shun the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil runs his groove in them rhythm and blues that sound. It's gonna get you, son, in the end.
Welcome back to The Speakeasy. I'm Damon Boelte.
And I'm Greg Benson.
And Sother's out of town.
Sother is out of town, exactly. So it's just the two of us. But you're back. Where have you been, man? How's life?
Oh, man. Sorry, I've been on the road quite a bit. I was in Kauai, Hawaii, which I call quiet.
My sympathies.
It's pretty quiet, which is nice. So it was actually a vacation. That was for my 1-year wedding anniversary. Jamie and I
Congrats.
got married a year ago. Yeah, thanks. And then we went to a friend's wedding directly from there in San Diego. And then, that was already a whirlwind. And then we went to Las Vegas for an entire week. I don't suggest that. And, I never did before. 3 nights in Vegas is like maybe too many, but we were there for an entire week because we started buying, we were like, we're going to go see the Rolling Stones. I had actually never seen the Rolling Stones before, believe it or not, and it's my first time.
Do they still have it?
Oh my God, they brought it so hard. It was amazing. It was insane, and so it was really cool. We got to see the Stones, but then also the Grateful Dead. They're at the Sphere, which is insane. It's the most insane venue I've ever seen in my life, and that was about a week later, and we were just like, you know what, we're not going to fly back and forth between Las Vegas and San Francisco. Let's just stay the whole week and kind of fill it out. And we did. And I'm surprised I'm still alive. I feel like a ghost right now. But yeah, man.
Yeah, that is a week vacationing in Las Vegas. Jesus, no wonder we couldn't find you for like the better part of a month.
Yeah, exactly. So
Jesus Christ.
And it's like, but this is the time of year where it starts. I mean, you're like the professional wedding goer of the group, so I'm sure you've got a lot going on this summer. But this is that time of year where the schedule just starts to you start to have like panic mode because you're like, I'm not going to have any free time for the next few months. Every single weekend is taken up with someone else's major life event, and you're like, well, yeah.
I guess I'm not learning to windsurf this summer either.
Yeah, I mean, like Jamie's birthday is this weekend, so we're having a party in the barn, and like there's that, and then the next weekend my band has a show. The weekend after that it's called Twinsmas. It's me and my twin brother's birthday, and then the weekend after that there's another big life event, and then BCB, and then Tales of the Cocktail, and then Fancy Food Show New York. It's just like there's just so much, man. It's exciting.
Before you know it, it's Thanksgiving. Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah. It's cool.
Well, I've got a piece of news, a piece of New York centric news that is, speaking of everyone's summer being upended. This is going to fundamentally, I think, change the calculus of summer 2024, because I just found out yesterday that there is a Mr. Softy app. Were you aware of this, Damon?
No.
There's a Mr. Softy app that tells you in real time the location of every single Mr. Softy truck in New York City. And I am of two minds about this. One, great, because there are times when you just need a Mr. Softy so bad that it's like it's an emergency. However, the magic of Mr. Softy, I think, is that it is unknown. That it is this ephemeral thing, like the tides that we as mere mortals have no control over. And should you be lucky enough to stumble across a Mr. Softy, that is the universe bestowing upon you a gift. And being able to hack that feels wrong to me somehow. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I'm more on the latter side of this because like there's magic in the like hearing the music and like seeing the truck come down the road, and that's like just Norman Rockwell, like it's just
Yes.
like classic, and you can't fuck with the classics too much. I mean, like I don't need like an app to tell me like where where I can find a Negroni or whatever. It's like I just
Applebee's now, apparently.
well, that's true. I mean, but you know what I mean. It's like there's magic in that. It's like remember there was there was an app called like On the Bar, I think is what it was called. And it was an app where like bartenders could like check it because especially in New York City, right, where bartenders will work at 2 or 3 different bars. And you could basically track your basically it was like kind of G-rated bartender stalking. So it was basically like you could check in whatever bar you were, or if you were guest bartending some night, and you could scroll through and see where your favorite bartender was, and like what, it's just kind of nice to walk into a place and see someone that if your favorite bar, it'd be like if I walked into PJ Clark's and you were in there working doing a guest shift that I didn't know about. I'd be like, what the fuck is this? This is amazing. There's something magic in that, just like the Mr. Frost. Yeah, I'm on I'm on that side of this app, but I can't say that it won't be like $1 million idea or that it's not.
I mean, yeah, I would hope that all the profits stay within the extended Mr. Softy universe because, they're an institution. But yeah, no, exactly. There's some magic in the surprise and like being able to find a Mr. Like I've fully gone on hour plus quests to try and find a Mr. Softy truck because like, and also this is one of these things where it's like knowledge that as a New Yorker you have to earn of just like where like the Mr. Softy like watering holes are. It almost kind of feels like a safari of like, well, I saw a wild one here once, which tells me that their feeding ground must be somewhere close. Let's check this park. It's like that's the magic of it. I don't know.
It's like taco trucks in San Diego. It's like just kind of like kind of figuring out where they end up.
Exactly. This all being said, I'm going to be a skeptic here. And then I'm almost 100% guaranteed to use this app at some point this summer because I'll be in a park and feeling lazy and be like, where's the closest Mr. Softy truck? But I don't know. It's the price we pay for living in the future. We sacrifice some magic for convenience. But speaking of magical new things, though, very, very excited to talk about this new cognac that came across our desks, by which I mean the cabinet where I keep all my liquor earlier this year. It's delightful, and I'm really, really excited to have its creator here in the virtual studio with us, Guillame Thomas of Martingale Cognac. Thank you so much for joining us, Guillame. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. I'm great. And actually, I'm glad because I've spent enough time in America and in New York to know what Mr. Softy is about. So I could follow what you were talking about. So I feel really happy now.
Okay. Yeah. See this, and that's the thing. This is the privileged information that you as a New York frequenter, as an honorary New Yorker, get to have. But yeah, I will say one of their trucks did chase me one time. I was on a run and it followed me for a long enough time that I'm pretty sure it wasn't an accident. I'm pretty sure the driver was screwing with me. And it's honestly kind of scary to be jogging and have that cheerful music just trailing you for the better part of a mile like that. That was up, but I'll forgive them because while it was creepy, it was really funny. So I'm glad that you understand. You can put yourself mentally into that experience, Guillame, as someone who's been here enough.
Yeah.
So where are you right now? Where are you coming to us live from?
So right now I'm in Paris, where I spend a significant part of my time. Actually, I've traveled quite a lot. I have this, I suppose some people call it privilege, others a curse. And for me, it depends on the weeks, whether it is a curse or a privilege. But I spend my time, I've lived the last 10 years, for the most part, in New York. And before that, in many countries. I'm French originally, obviously. And now I'm splitting my time between New York, Los Angeles, where we also launched a Martingale Cognac, and we have a team. Paris, Cognac, and the south of France, where my kids live. So it's it's a pretty diverse places.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
That's first of all, I have to say I'm a huge cognac fan, and I've been to Cognac several times, and I just like it's a magical place for me. One of my first trip with the BNIC actually through this radio show as a journalist, and it must have been I think 2010 or so, long time ago. So I've been going since then, and it's one of my favorite spirits, and I love Shantae's pot stills. I mean, they're just gorgeous. You know, there's a lot of magic. Speaking of Mr. Softy Magic, there's a lot of magic in cognac. So like I was a little concerned with that segue that you were going through there, Greg, but I think we're aligned.
We got there.
Yeah, we got there. We made it happen. I do want to say I love this for our listeners because I'm going to talk about visuals, but I'm a visual guy because I used to be a designer, and I love this bottle. It is beautiful. It's like it's like this like kind of I don't know crystal cut glass with the Martingale cigar band kind of logo on the bottom. It's just like it's perfect. It feels very substantial. And are you going to make glasses to match this, or have you? Because that would be a really cool.
Somebody already made glasses to match that. I'm just noticing right now that I inadvertently dressed on theme for this podcast. You guys see it?
Yeah, your glasses are actually shaped like
actually, yeah.
So
yeah,
all for you, Guillaume. It's all for you.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice.
So I mean, but that's only part of it, right? So it's what's in the bottle. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about Martingale? This cognac is awesome. As you can see, I've already had quite a bit of it.
Thank you. I love the support and love the all the great things you said about the bottle, and thank you very much. And all the great things you said about cognac. I'm glad that you were able to make it. It's not the most convenient place to go to, although it's getting a bit easier. But it's certainly a beautiful and special place. And it's funny because before this, I had a chat with my co-founder, who's Scottish by birth, but spent the last 20 years in America. And I grew up in Cognac, so sometimes it's hard to realize where you grew up somewhere. It's hard to realize how pretty is it. But I've traveled enough that every time I go back to Cognac, which is very often, I love it. It's beautiful, and I love summer in Cognac. It's very hot and warm. And beautiful, and the vineyards are at their maximum lush. So thank you for saying all the things you said. So Martingale Cognac, as I said, I was born in Cognac, and I grew up there. I come from what we call a distilling family, even though actually my family has been making cognac really starting from the vineyards all the way to the aging. For now, a bit more than a century. Actually, technically, my family, we believe, started to make cognac, or parts of my family, probably in the middle of the 19th century. But since we don't have exact documentation of all of that, we really started, I would say, the family naissance in 1920, which is when my great-grandfather acquired a farm in the Cognac area. And then since then, it evolved into one of the largest domain in the Cognac area. We start at the nursery of the vine. We have one of the largest vineyards in the top 4 sub areas of Cognac. So Cognac is in France what we call an appellation. So it's a denominated area which is strictly regulated. Within that, you have 6 sub areas which are called cru. We have vineyards in the top 4. We have one of the largest distillery, which was really the expertise. My grandfather was the very inspiring character and figure for the family that led us to where we are today. And he was really a very skilled distiller. And then we have our own warehouses and age inventory. After my great-grandfather, my grandfather took over after the Second World War. Then my uncle, and now my cousin is running really the family historical business, which is making cognac for other and for great brands that usually buy aged cognac and blend it and age it further to make their own products. And a few years ago, my cousin and my dad, who's kind of the chairman, if you want, of the business and a bit of the historical figure, they approached me because I spent a long time in the corporate world and in the spirits business at Pernod Ricard in many affiliates around the world. And they said, with your experience and and with all the production capabilities that we have in cognac, we should really try and have our own brand. So we'll continue to supply some great cognac to the great brands, but we also wanted to have our own venture. And for me, it really resonated with a lot of the things that I've lived in my life, and the fact that growing up, I was following my grandfather all the time in the vineyards, in the distillery, and running alongside him. And we were very, very close. And he passed away. I was actually already living in America and working for Pernod Ricard. And before he died, he said, Guillaume, I've done a lot of things in my life, and we got a great legacy. We are very fortunate with my cousin and the rest of my siblings and the rest of the family. He led us a great legacy, but he said, Guillaume, I hope one day with your experience at Pernod Ricard and working in so many countries, maybe with your cousin, you will launch the family brand. And so I suppose when my cousin approached me, my dad, and where I was in my life, it all made sense. And I said, you know what, I think it's what I don't know if anyone is meant to do something in life, but I certainly thought that I was meant to try that. So now I'm trying.
Well, that's awesome. I love the origin story. We love a good origin story here at the Speakeasy.
Well, it's I suppose as grounded and as authentic as it gets, I suppose, because literally grew up there.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And I also think it's cool kind of too that your story is not that you were, you just went straight into the family business. You kind of tried a few other things and then you kind of came back in and sort of it sort of strikes me as like kind of an Ocean's 11-y sort of thing, where so you got roped in for one more big score,
Yeah.
One last.
And talk to me a little bit about that, because I had some difficulty, I'll admit, when I was a young bartender, kind of wrapping my head around this particular notion about cognac that I think is really interesting, which is that a lot of the brands that people know are more kind of renowned for being blenders, and a lot of them don't actually do a lot of the production the way we as Americans think of, this distillery
whiskey,
distills this whiskey. Yeah, exactly. And cognac doesn't work that way, which means that what you're doing with Martingale here is a little bit revolutionary. It's trying to say, okay, not only are we distilling this stuff, we think it's good enough that we want to create our own mark, our own label around it. What sort of I don't know, what brought you to rock the boat a little bit that way?
Yeah, it's so you're right. If I say a word about the cognac industry, it has historically been divided between really there's three tiers mainly. There's the wine growers, then there's the distillers, and then there's the négociants or brands, if you want. And I mean, it's historical, it's industrial, it echoes. I mean, there's a ton of reasons, and I don't know if I can get into all of them. I mean, I would say it reflects some of the things that happened in some of the French vineyards historically, whereby some of the brands, in the French vineyards, they don't always grow their own wine, actually. Although the most prestigious ones obviously tend to own their own grapes and then make their own wine and age it. It's not always the case. And so, and that's one thing. I would say the other thing is also one of the things which we love to do in cognac is, as I said, you have, even though it's not a huge area, cognac itself, it's very different. The terroirs and the soils are very different within cognac. And there is a value in blending, and cognac is always a blend, almost always a blend. And there's a reason for that. It's not by, I would say, industrial design. It's really because genuinely, we believe in cognac that blending is an art that's going to make much more interesting and great products than if you just choose one vintage from one small areas. So in that way, because it was always created as a blend, because we believe that the different terroirs and different vintages complement themselves to create fantastic products, it's probably because of that as well that the brands actually focused more on sourcing different components and blending them so that they would create products that would be enjoyed by consumers. So historically, that's where it comes from. And so for us, it really took us... I love cognac. I've always loved cognac, and I grew up, obviously, as you can imagine, drinking it. And in France, we were fortunate enough that when I grew up, the legal drinking age was 16 years old, actually. So it's 5 years younger than you in America. And I always had cognac, and very often with my family. I remember from a young age sitting down after the business meals with my grandfather in the family house and having those moments. So I've always loved cognac, and I think cognac is a fantastic spirit that's very interesting, powerful, rich, intense. But I find that particularly in America, cognac has been a bit narrow in what it has offered consumers, partly because it was very successful. But you have really, cognac has created hence some perceptions which I think are not reflective of all the things that cognac can be. And our idea with my cousin was, okay, we would like to have our own brand, but it's not to do what other people do already very well, and I respect a lot of the work of the great brands. It's to bring something new. And it took us 3 years to find a formula that we think is interesting, which is going to let the grapes, the wine, the terroirs shine and bring a product that is quintessentially a cognac because of its fragrances and aromas, which are so incredibly elegant and complex, but will be maybe fresher, will let the eau de vie and the wine shine a lot more and not be too much on those very intense, very rich, very dark brown notes that you can find in other cognacs.
I gotta say that, like, when it comes, like, the misconception of what blending is when it comes to also another thing about blending is it's different for a lot of different spirit categories, right? So, like,
Yes.
for instance, like Irish whiskey, it's like you can blend unaged with aged. That's completely different from, like, the bourbon. It has to be a certain minimum age requirement. In cognac, you're also blending. Think about it this way too. It's like when you talk about, like, bourbon, for instance, I mean, it has to be predominantly corn, right? But then you can have rye, wheat, barley, any other grain on the back end, really. What I like about cognac is it's a little bit more focused, right? There's only a handful of grapes you can legally use, right? Uni Blanc being the main one.
Yep.
For the listeners out there who don't know what Uni Blanc is, if you're into Italian wines, it's Trebbiano. And then Fall Blanche and Colombard, right? So specifically French Colombard. But to me, that's like, and those are like the big three that are used predominantly, right? And then there's a few others that you can use, but you really mainly see those three. So even when you think about, like, the grains that are available to be used in, like, say, American whiskey, it's like it's even tighter with cognac, mostly. But what's really cool to me about this is that, when I've gone to those big, or I'm not going to name any names, the big cognac houses that we all know, it was kind of shocking, kind of jarring to me that, as you said, like the negociant, like you can't produce that much brandy, you can't produce that much wine on your own unless you just own all of the Grand Champagne region of France. Like, there's you would have to, like, basically just monopolize it. So they bring in, they'll either buy wine or buy the finished brandy from the smaller cognac producers and winemakers. And I love that this is, like, from the estate, like, this is yours, right? This is like, this is the family. It's like from start to finish.
Yes.
That's so cool. And that's I know that might not sound very noteworthy to a lot of people who are into, say, American whiskeys, but it's actually a really big deal for cognac, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm French, so I'm going to be honest. We are not the only ones doing it.
Sure.
I would say we are probably the first ones doing it with that level of ambition of creating a new style of cognac, and with the fact that we, being one of the largest producers, those who've tried to do it, they precisely about blending, they source usually from a smaller domain. But because we have our domain and our own vineyards in the top 4 areas, and we have a lot of aged inventory from different years and a lot of different casks, we are probably able to, while controlling everything from really grape all the way to a finished product, we are still able to blend all the things that can make a great cognac, a great cognac, if that makes sense. So it's pretty unique and pretty new. And part of the reasons, by the way, why the large brands are not really able to do that, beyond what you just said, is that cognac, and I know the word craft in our industry in the US has been so overused that I don't know if it means anything anymore, but my understanding as a French person of craft is what we do in cognac is that the pot stills are very small, much smaller than whether it's in Scotland or in Bourbon. The vineyards, although we do use it's machine harvesting, it's not hand harvesting, we still make wine, so it's still a winemaking process which has to follow fairly, I would say, artisanal ways of doing it. So that's also why the value chain is so fragmented, is that it needs to be managed by small owner, grape growers, distillers, etc., that can apply the sufficient level of art and craftsmanship to those things that, that are managed in a small way, in other words.
Well, that's interesting. And as we're talking, I'm going to just enjoy a little bit of it myself over here.
I was going to say, to me, like when it comes to blending, another part of that is, I always say, distillation takes science, blending takes soul. And it's something that you can't just, you can't go to school for it. Also, you have to learn it. There's a reason why you never really meet like a head blender that doesn't have like the last name that's on the bottle. It's very rare. Yeah. But Greg,
and that, by the way, was a big challenge for us, because having never had our own brand, my cousin, even though he's a brilliant agricultural engineer, he's an enologist, he worked in a Bordeaux wine before joining the family business and managing everything. We were making the best possible eau de vie, but I think you said it very well. It's a very different form of art to be able to blend it and create a great cognac. And that's why it took us 3 years, because we needed to learn. We took some advice from very experienced blenders until we were really able to make our own blend.
Yeah, it takes a lot of experience, for sure.
Yeah.
And Greg, you were about to say something.
Well, I was just wondering if that's kind of what you're talking about when you say, like, creating a whole new type of cognac. I think it's I'm just thinking it might be hard to kind of impress on someone of like what a sort of revolutionary idea this is of yours to do this. And I'm also curious how it's been received by the industry at large. I mean, obviously the juice is good, and cheers, thank you very much for sending me the bottle. But I'm wondering kind of how the industry has how people are talking about it, how you're kind of getting that point across to your consumers. And because I love drama, how are your competitors feeling about it?
So it's a funny question for me, because it's we are a very small company. We are a century-old family business, but essentially our brand is a very young brand, right? Because we launched only 6 months ago. And like I often say that the cognac industry is a great family, but like great families, you have a lot of inner fights and a lot of drama. So it has all the characteristics of a family. So I'll be very honest. Have we been noticed? Yes, for sure. And I know for a fact that I have people who worked in some of the larger cognac brands, and when they were doing reports for the top management of their companies, they were saying, oh, there's a new entrant in the cognac category. They are trying to do something different. And so we have been noticed. And by the way, I have a lot of friends in the industry. I've been myself an executive at Pernod Ricard. Look, I think people realize that first we are trying to do something different in terms of profile, in terms of age, in terms of price points, where not too many people are already present. I think they are seeing that we are also, what we are doing is trying to expand the consumer base and trying to attract people who love high-end spirits and whiskey in particular to maybe consider cognac while they would not consider it otherwise. So I hope everybody sees that we are really trying to help educate on cognac and help grow something rather than trying to upset anyone. Obviously, for us, it's important because, by the way, my family business, to a large extent, will still rely on the good relationships that we have with the large brands. So, and I have to say that, and it's quick shout out to my previous company where I left with after 20 years, and I spent fantastic years, formative years. You talked about Irish whiskey. I had the privilege of working for 3.5 years in Ireland with the teams. They are amazing, and beyond that, Pernod Ricard teams are great. And the CEO of Pernod Ricard, whom I was quite close to, Alexandre Ricard, when I decided to leave Pernod Ricard to do that, I had prepared my pitch, and I wanted to make sure that everything would be smooth. And he said, Guillaume, one, I love the idea. 2, I knew you were going to do that one day. And 3, how can I help? So I thought they were great with me. So I hope it stays that way.
That's great. That's what we want to hear.
Yeah.
I love me some messy drama, but I love a heartwarming family story even more.
Yes.
I have a road trip. I'm Lou Bank.
And I'm Greg Benson.
And this is an ad for Ancestral Agave Syrup, the critically acclaimed award-winning syrup that helps gringo bartenders better make margaritas, Negronis,
Lou, hold up. Wait,
old
are you just
fashions?
This is how you start your podcast.
What?
It's not an ad for Ancestral Agave Syrup.
Well, of course it is. I'm just cutting costs by not paying writers to make something new. I'm just using an old script.
You pay writers?
Is that some kind of jab?
No, I'm just saying that.
What are you saying?
Well, look, we've got this amazing syrup that's made in an ancestral manner, cooked down from the sap of the agave, harvested the way these families would to make pulque. It's a quality product. It deserves a quality presentation.
Yeah, okay, hang on. Ancestral agave syrup is made by real families following traditional methods. Unlike the industrial Blue Weber syrup you get everywhere else, Ancestral is cooked down from agua miel, harvested from Salmiana in Hidalgo, Mexico. It is the grade A Vermont maple to the sticky diner syrup you've been using for your cocktails. Ingredients matter, both in how your cocktail tastes and how you treat the earth. Ancestral is better for both. Is that good?
Sure. Or maybe confusing instead of cheesy. Look, just visit ancestralagave.com to learn more and to order your world-class agave syrup today.
And we'll call that a wrap. Catch you next ad, Greg.
Hasta pronto?
Ancestral Agave Syrup. Available online at ancestralagave.org and wherever Greg and Lou are able to coerce store owners into carrying it.
I want to ask, I kind of talked about the BNIC kind of sets the standards for listeners, that's the Bureau National Interprofessional de Cognac. They're the bosses of
the regulating body, you could say.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mentioned Uni Blanc and Faute Blanche and Colombard. What goes into Martingale?
So,
or can you say?
Well, of course I can say, because it's fairly simple and straightforward, actually. We only use Uni Blanc, so that's the grape you were talking about. And by the way, there's probably 98% of cognac is actually made with Uni Blanc. The other vines are very rarely used. So we use Uni Blanc. And you talk about the BNIC, it's one of those weird things you could say in France, is that we create a lot of regulatory bodies and there's a lot of rules and regulations. And I would say cognac is probably the tightest regulated category in the world. And I've worked, as I said, in different whiskey areas. And because we really, as you know, in whiskey, you can source your barley, your wheat from a lot of different areas, and you still call it whatever, Scottish, Japanese, Irish, bourbon. So we, in cognac, it's very, very tightly regulated. And in a way, it's positive, because I think it has helped the category maintain extremely hard standards of production. It has pushed towards excellence and creating the cognac name itself. I think is in a way brand, with like champagne, for example, as well. And my grandfather was very, very involved at the BNIC for many years. So the BNIC has representatives from the brands, representatives from the distillers, and from the wine growers. And my grandfather, for many years, presided for the distillers. And my cousin actually also sat on the board of the BNIC for many years. So they were very instrumental in setting the standards for how cognac should be made. And so back to your questions, we use, it's very simple. We only use Uni Blanc to make our wine from our own vineyards and from the 4 top crus, Grand Champagne, Petite Champagne. We use a lot of Borderie. We use Borderie. You shouldn't put too much in any cognac, I think, but we do want to have Borderie because we love Borderie. That's the smallest sub-area, but that creates fantastic eau de vie that are very floral and very light and very elegant. And my grandfather always loved Borderie. And we use Fin Bois as well, so the top 4 crus. and then we age them. So our cognac, as you know, in cognac you have aged-based names. So VS, very special, 2 years old. VSOP, very special, old pale, minimum 4 years old. And then it immediately jumps to XO, extra old, which is 10 years old. And that I think opened the gap in the market. XO, by the way, used to be 6 years old until fairly recently.
2018, yeah.
Exactly. So it's quite recent. And I said it's too much of a gap, VSOP to XO. I think there are great products to create that will have enough age so that they have that kind of not resilience, permanence and remanence and longevity and spice and complexity, which we want to create a very elegant product. And so our cognacs are 6 years old on average, between 5 and 7 years old, but mostly 6 years old and a bit of 7 years old. And so Uni Blanc, top 4 cru, we distill in our own copper pot stills, and then we age in French oak, as is the regulation in cognac, for 6 years, and that's it. We don't add anything. We don't put boisé. We don't put caramel, or we put a super tiny amount of caramel. But you will notice that our cognac is much clearer than most of the cognacs you see. It's that because we don't want to add anything. We want it to be as pure as it gets, to, again, let the eau de vie talk, let the wine talk, let the terroir talk, let the fruit and the freshness come forward, which is fairly uncommon for cognac.
Are you putting any, are you using Febs? Or you're not even using Febs?
What's Febs?
It's the FAIBLES.
No.
No? Okay.
We only, no.
Okay.
And no sugar. And so when we do I think you use them, when you do the reduction, we only use water.
Okay. That's different also. I mean, that's very,
Yeah.
It's unusual, because like the cognac tools are kind of something that are mysterious to a lot of people who, even if they love cognac, they don't realize that there's syrup, there's
that we don't do, for example.
Boisé, Febs.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But legally, you're allowed to use those.
So yeah, legally, and again, I don't want to.
It's cool that you don't.
Sound. Yeah, it's the difference we make. And look, again, the brands that use caramel, boisé in particular, syrup, sugar, have had a lot of success, and I'm enjoying some of their products. So I'm not here to say that all of that is rubbish. I just think that we are after something which is a bit more pure. But to get to a product that would be pure but still extremely enjoyable with the fragrances and also the softness and smoothness, it was very hard for us to create our blend. So we are very proud about what we created, because it was hard to do without those additives. Yes.
That's awesome. Well, it just feels more natural.
Yeah, and I mean the flavor comes through great.
Yeah,
how would I've got my own kind of feelings about it, but like, it's I think it's delightful. But sort of, how would you, I guess, describe this? Like, how are you putting this forward to people, and how are you sort of talking about some of like the flavor notes that you get off of this process that you're using?
Yeah. So at the simplest level, the way we describe it is the aromas of a great wine meet the structure and texture of a very elegant whiskey. So think about one of the benchmarks with my cousin when we created Martingale was not so much trying to beat some of the best cognac, was also Hibiki, the Japanese whiskey, for example, because I love their structure and their texture, and I find it so refined. And so if I go one level below that, on the nose and on the flavors, what you could find, I'm not saying you should find, because everybody will find whatever they want, and that's the beauty of tasting, and you guys know all about that, so I'm not going to give you any lesson here. But for us, what we try to find, at least, and what we love is, as I said, we love floral notes, so white flowers should be there. They come from the Borderie. And from a fruit point of view, you could find pear, maybe a bit of apricot as well. So these type of fruits. What you wouldn't find are maybe the dried fruits, the cigars, the earthy notes that are great in other cognacs. That's not what we're after. For us, we are more about, again, those floral notes and those fruits like, again, pear or apricot. And then from a texture point of view, because we have enough age, like 6-7 years old is not a young cognac. You don't have that bite. You don't have that maybe harshness that sometimes come with the fact that either they've known a lot of wood, and with the boisé that brings a lot of tannins and wood, or that come from younger eau de vie. So we are at that sweet spot where you have a very refined texture, and you have also the persistence and the mouthfeel that makes a great eau de vie and a great cognac. And that comes from the age and the fact that you have Grand and Petit Champagne that are underpinning the fragrances and aromas that come from Borderie and Framboise. So that's how we've created that product.
Apricot eau de vie on the palate. That's where I was. And yeah, and pear, obviously, but the apricot eau de vie, it's on the palate for me. So, and I love apricot.
Great.
So yeah.
Great.
It's really singing to me.
Yeah, and I was glad that you brought up American whiskey, because like I love, like, the first notes I get off of it are this very kind of like that sort of spice driven thing that you get off of some really, you know, nice, well crafted, well aged American whiskeys. But there's this, I was kind of like circling around the sort of fruitier notes. I definitely get some pear off of it. So when you said that, I was kind of had that moment. I was like, oh yeah, that's what that flavor is. But yeah, like the white flowers at the end, particularly, I get kind of like a chamomile thing at like the very end of it, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah.
Wow,
you like it.
It's great. I mean, I've enjoyed it because the bottle's almost empty. But we did get it pretty. We had a lot of runway with this. I think we got the bottle like, I don't know, a month and a half ago or something like that. So
I need to send you your bottles closer to the actual like due date. I'll specify next time.
No.
Like send 48 hours in advance.
No, don't do that. So the thing is, you're usually really good about like, or at least the PR companies or whoever's handling the sample bottles, they're usually like pretty tight to the point where like I get it and it's like, oh, I should probably taste this and open it right now, and you know, let my wife Jamie try it and see what she thinks, because this is what we're going to be talking about on the show next week. And we had a lot of time to discuss this, Jamie and I. So I really appreciate it. So I was going to say that I like to me, like this is just a wonderful cognac, and I'm not saying that just because you're on the show and in front of me right now. Like I said before, I'm a big cognac fan, but this does hit, like you said, it's like perfectly. It's not an XO. It doesn't have tons of oak extraction, but it's there. So it's enough. It's balanced. To me, I don't even want to like mix it into a cocktail, even though I'm a huge cocktail guy. I'm sure you are too, having worked for Pernod Ricard for many years and also living in New York City. You can't live in New York City and not like cocktails. It's kind of cocktail mecca, right? So if you were going to mix a cocktail with this, what would be your go-to?
I do love cocktails. I do love cocktails. No, yeah, I would absolutely, and I would. I mean, cognacs for a long time, for some reason, actually abandoned, I would say, the cocktail culture, which, and again, I'm not going to teach any of you guys who are experts at the cocktail culture that cognac was a very important ingredient I would say in the 1920s. And when cocktail culture started to be codified and written about, cognac was very important. You had cocktails like Sazerac, Vieux Carré. You had a ton of cocktails that included cognac. Or brandy, but certainly cognac as well.
Just brandy in general. I mean, it's the oldest. It was the original. It was original spirit going back to punches, even before cocktails. I mean,
yes,
it predates. You know, the original mint julep was made with brandy, and it predates. The mint julep as a cocktail predates bourbon by 2 decades. You know, so that's just crazy to think about. So brandy is extremely important for cocktails.
Yes,
but you know, like you were saying, like the Sazerac and the Vieux Carré,
yes,
things like that.
So now we've tried a lot of cocktails, and I think Martingale, and again, I know all brands say that, but I do think that we have a fairly good versatility, being again more on the fresher and smoother side. two of the cocktails we've selected. One is Sidecar. Now, it's not the most original. As you know, it's the kind of most used cocktail with cognac, but I do think it's a fantastic cocktail. And when you think about it, Sidecar is essentially a margarita, and you replace cognac, tequila by cognac, and you replace lime by lemon. But it's essentially something that it's fairly easy to understand. And we also did a bit of a twist on the French 75 by replacing the gin with cognac. And that twist and that new cocktail, we call it the doubling down, which is, by the way, a tribute to the name Martingale. Martingale is a sure way to winning at something. The Martingale in the casinos is about doubling down your bets and being resilient. And more generally, finding your Martingale in life, finding your success is all about taking the time to find your recipe that you can replicate. And it takes a lot of time, and it takes sometimes taking risks. So anyway, we've called our kind of version of the French 75 the double down. So these are two of the most commonly used. I love a Boulevardier with Martingale. I think it's delicious. And I do love a Vieux Carré, although I will be honest, I'm not very good at making them. So I'm usually only having them with professional bartenders.
Greg, do you have any go-to? Do you even like cocktails, Greg?
I dabble. Actually, to be honest, I had last night when I got home from an event that I was doing, I made one of my personal favorite overlooked classics, a Japanese cocktail. If you're wondering what's Japanese about it, the answer is nothing. Jerry Thomas just called it that because he thought it sounded exotic and cool, and that's what white guys did in the 1800s. I guess also the 2000s.
I have the story.
Okay, all right. Tell me the story.
Yeah, it was 1860. Jerry Thomas had moved from California to Manhattan, and he was running. He was like he was this famous bartender, right? And so he had politicians and foreign dignitaries coming in to visit him all the time. He was like a celebrity. It was the first time that the Japanese dignitaries had visited New York, and so he named it. Brandy was extremely popular. Orgeat was this new thing that was kind of going around. And this is 1860. Think about the Mai Tai being the thing that we think about incorporating orgeat. This is, again, how important brandy is and cognac is in the canon of classic cocktails. It's almost a century before the Mai Tai, orgeat was being used in the Japanese cocktail. Otherwise, it's an old fashioned, right? So you've got your brandy, you've got your orgeat, and you've got Angostura bitters. I kind of think of it as like a summery old fashioned, honestly, because
it's fantastic. It's the old fashioned of the summer, and I knew that story, but I didn't realize it was I knew it was like a visiting foreign dignitary. I honestly thought it was someone European. I didn't realize it was a Japanese dignitary. So that makes the name make a little bit more sense.
We can thank Joaquin Simo for that one. He was the one who enlightened me to that story many years ago.
Okay, but yeah, it's a great classic cocktail. Like you said, it's basically just a cognac old fashioned with orgeat, which is also delightful. And yeah, it's very summery, and I enjoy making it for the day walkers. And they're like, wait, so what's Japanese about this? And I'm like, nothing. It's with it's almond syrup, and
the first person who had it is Japanese.
Exactly. Yes, that's true. Okay, so I'll add that to the story now. It's like the first person who drank it, and then after that, nothing really. So it's a lovely drink.
That's a really good call for this one, especially with the flavor and the structure of it. I can see that working perfectly in a Japanese cocktail for sure.
Sounds definitely like an idea. I'm going to try that.
Yeah, one of my favorite cocktails of all time happens to be from another New York City bartender who I believe at one point worked with Joaquin Simo I think they worked together at oh my God. It'll come to me in a second. Somewhere in Soho, I believe. But anyway, Nate Dumas. He came up with a drink that's like kind of like it's in the PDT cocktail book, and it's the only cocktail that doesn't have like ham infused this or popcorn infused that, or whatever. It's very non-Don Lee. But it's called the Montgomery Smith, and I've made it a billion times for a billion people, and it's just so simple. And the ingredients have always been there in every bar forever. The youngest ingredient, they're all very old, but the youngest ingredient's like 180 years old, and that's Fernet Branca. But it's essentially a B&B, Or you could think of it, if you stretch your mind a little bit, it's kind of in an old-fashioned format, just because you have your base spirit of cognac, right? You have your sweetener instead of simple syrup, it's Benedictine. So that's already a B&B, right? Brandy and Benedictine. But then for the bitter, instead of Angostura, you use Fernet Branca, which is, everyone knows I love Fernet Branca. And it is one of the greatest cocktails. It's served up with a lemon twist, stirred, obviously. We're not monsters. So the thing is, think about it. That any dive bar that you could ever gone to throughout history of the last 200 years probably had those ingredients in it, I mean, I'm sure the Benedictine, maybe the Fernet was a little dustier than the Benedictine bottle, but the cognac was probably nice and shiny. So it comes out tasting like it's got like kind of a black tea kind of thing going on with it. It's just a beautiful thing. The honey from the Benedictine and the spice with the cognac, and then you get that little Fernet Branca for some mint, and oh man, it's just so good. And I tend to gush a lot on brandy cocktails just because, I mean, they truly are. They are the original cocktails. You can't have. I mean, geez, you can't have anything. Like you mentioned the sidecar in the margarita. The sidecar, goes back to that's 1930. So we were in the middle of, we're close to the end of Prohibition, American Prohibition here. When you think about that format, and as another bartender, Phil Ward, would say, it's called Mr. Potato Head. So you just swap out one part, like an eye for an eye, and ear for an ear, or nose for nose, or whatever. Swapping out the citrus for lemon for lime, right? And then the cognac for tequila, and then otherwise you've got Curacao, which also is brandy base, traditionally. So yeah, I mean, it's you can't even have a margarita without brandy being involved, because it has Curacao. Originally would have Curacao, which is brandy based, orange liqueur. So just say it. I mean, like brandy goes deep.
Yep.
So, well, I mean, what's coming up next for you?
Yeah,
John? Like, what's the plan from here? Because I've started seeing it on some shelves. I've started one of my local liquor stores has started carrying it, and I kind of gave it a little the other day when I was in there.
Thank you.
To just sort of I don't know, pay tribute, I guess. But what are you all doing next? What's coming down the pipeline for you and for Martingale and the rest of the family?
So this is a long term, and I mean, our legacy, and the time in cognac is always very long, and this is a legacy that we've received from my father, my uncles, my grandfather, that we want to continue with my cousin. As I said, we launched only in New York and Los Angeles last October. So we are 7 months with the brand itself. So we want to establish ourselves. I mean, the market of spirits right now is a bit challenging, as I'm sure you know. So we want to still establish ourselves, and I think we are finding our place, even though the context is a bit challenging. So we're going to take the time to really work some of the selected markets that we want to approach, mainly in the US first. We will expand gradually around Los Angeles. So we are looking at Southern and Northern California. We are probably going to expand to Arizona. We'll see if we go to Vegas. You were talking about Vegas earlier, but Vegas is crazy. So I don't know when we'll get there. We are going to expand.
Only stay for 3 days max. That's the lesson here.
Yeah, exactly. And so we'll gradually expand to some of the main metropolitan areas in the US. And again, we are trying to establish our brand as really a new, it's not a new category, because I respect so much the cognac. I'm happy and proud to be part of the cognac category, but we want to establish ourselves as a new style of cognac, and it's going to take time. It's going to take time and education, and I have a fantastic team that we've been able to hire that's helping us doing that. We have great investors. Some of them are fairly famous, although this is not a celebrity brand. We just happen to be fortunate enough that two people
Taylor Swift.
Exactly. Although I think my daughters would think a lot more of me like a hero if I had done that, rather.
Wouldn't that be wild if you just didn't tell them and she just showed up to dinner at your house one day?
Yes.
Like,
yes,
oh yeah, this is Taylor. This is my business partner. Do you two know each other? Like, yeah.
No, so I have better than Taylor Swift. No, we are very fortunate. We have DJ D Nice, who's working with us, Derek Jones, who's been an amazing partner with us, and we have Donnie Wahlberg as well, and both of them are investors and very supportive. So yeah, we like they are very diverse. By the way, the two of them are close friends. But yeah, I know, unexpected, right? So
did not see that coming.
Exactly, unexpected. And so yeah, we are going to build that brand from the ground with the right partners, with the right people, educating and trying to carve out a bit of a niche and hopefully expand cognac to be enjoyed by people who would not consider it necessarily in their repertoire. We are going to try and expand internationally as well, again, being selective. I'm looking right now in Nigeria, which is one of the most important and emerging cognac markets in the world, probably South Africa at some point. And then, of course, Asia is a huge cognac market. I don't think our product is necessarily geared towards the traditional way of consuming cognac. So we are going to try and find a positioning that's going to be consistent with what we're trying to do, which is probably a bit more anticipating the future evolution of cognac consumption or high-end spirits in general consumption in Asia, probably through the cocktail, probably through some of the cocktail culture, high-end cocktail culture, maybe with French gastronomy. We see how we approach those markets. So it's a long story for us to build that brand in the right way, educating people. The short-term news is that right now we're only available in 700 milliliters format. We're going to introduce a half bottle, which is going to be super beautiful. Because you were kind enough, Damon, to say that you love the tall bottle. The small one is going to be extremely beautiful as well, very similar to the tall one. And we'll keep going like that. In terms of product themselves, we on purpose launched Martingale as one brand, one size, one product, one style, because we want to establish ourselves as this new style of cognac. And it's going to continue like that. Will we have some maybe limited editions for fun or things like that? Possibly. But launching a new cognac, a new recipe, if you want, or a new variant, it's going to be a bit hard because I would like to go up, not necessarily down in terms of age and quality and etc. But the challenge that as we would go up in age, we are going to be using older eau de vie by definition, and they are going to develop some of more great flavors, but different to what we are trying to do, like more cigar, more earth, more dried fruit and all of that, which is going to be a different style. So keeping our style, we don't know yet. We haven't figured it out. But we have a lot of things to do before that.
It takes a lot of patience and time to make cognac,
yes,
right? And also, you just never know what's going to happen in the barrel. You have to it's like you can't read the future. You have to let it do its thing. It's like you have to be the snail, right? You're just like moving slowly and just observing. And that's the magic, That's the magic.
Yes.
Of cognac.
Yep. And actually, I don't know if you knew that, Damon, but the snail is actually the one animal that is the emblem of the area of cognac.
Oh yeah,
Kagui. It's called the
yeah.
Kagui. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not escargot, but Kagui.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I know. That's why I brought it up, because I think it's such a profound imagery. When you think about the snail and the time that it takes and the patience.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, this has been great. I could talk about this forever. We're out of time. I can't wait to talk more about you. So we'll have to have you back on the show sometime.
With pleasure.
We can keep going. But I think we've really talked about a lot today. And so thank you for taking time out of your day in Paris. Get out there and have fun.
That's the plan.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, where can people find you online? Website?
We have a website. We have Instagram, both Martingale Cognac. So yeah.
Okay. Easy enough.
That's where we are. Yeah.
All right.
Enough. Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. This has been great. Greg, have you had fun today?
I've had an awesome time today.
Okay,
I'm having. The only thing would be make it better is if a Mr. Softy truck pulled up in my. It was right there as soon as I was done. This would be a fun pairing with this cognac. But
find them on the app.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Track them down.
Awesome. Well, hey, this has been great. Thank you so much again for today. And thanks to everyone who listens to the show and checks out the Speakeasy on Heritage Radio Network. Check out the station for many more programs like this one. Till next time, santé.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Santé.
So you don't charm the devil with your rock.
The Speakeasy is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food and drink radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.
It's gonna get you some in the end.
Hi, listeners. We want to tell you about a podcast we're really digging. It's called Christopher Kimball's Milk Street Radio. Every week, they travel the world to find the most fascinating stories about food, including children who harvest cod tongues after school in Norway and a detective who tracks down food thieves. And on Milk Street Radio, you can always find the unexpected. The comedian who ranks apples using an elaborate 100-point system, the secret history of grocery stores, and how to eat your way through Italy. They also interview the most beloved names in food like Jacques Pepin, Sola Aweli, Jose Andres, Jet Tila, Ina Garten, Nigella Lawson, and Padma Lakshmi. Plus, co-hosts Christopher Kimball and Sarah Moulton do live calls with listeners and answer their questions about ingredients, techniques, and culinary mysteries. Like, why roasting a leg of lamb made one caller's oven explode? Ever wonder why your bread won't rise or your souffle falls flat? Chris and Sarah have the answers. You'll also hear from a rotating cast of contributors, including Kenji Lopez-Alt, Cheryl Day, Dan Pashman from The Sporkful, and Alex Ainuz, a French guy cooking from YouTube. Take a listen at 177milkstreet.com/radio or just search your podcast app for Milk Street Radio.